each of you for coming out to this really important event. As far as we know, this is the first time that the International Day to End Violence Against Sex Workers has been recognized in South Florida. Yay! So this day was originated back in 2003, and it was a response to memorializing the prostitutes who were killed by the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway. And this was a horrible instance of violence against women, and particularly prostitutes, who are a vulnerable population. And it's really illustrated through his killing spree of 20 years. How could this go on for 20 years? And he confessed to killing 90 women, and most of them very young women. You would think if this had been a different population, say a population of college girls, something might have been done a little bit sooner to catch the person.
Not to mention Wall Street bankers.
Right. Exactly. So, so that's how this originated, was to memorialize his victim. And we had a vigil on the beach earlier, some of you were able to come to, and we read the names of sex workers who have been murdered in the past couple of years, the ones that we know of. Of course, so many would be the names of the ones we aren't even aware of. So now we're coming together. We're activists of all sorts and concerned people of all sorts coming together to be united against violence against sex workers. And we're going to have a few speakers here tonight before we do our march. And just a couple of housekeeping details. We'll be marching up the sidewalk on Dixie Highway to the Night Heron Grassroots Activist Center. Dixie Highway is a symbolic place for us to march because it is known for street prostitution, and there's a lot of unsafe conditions with street prostitution. So when we get to the Night Heron, we'll have some desserts and hot drinks if anybody's cold. And we'll have an opportunity for a speak out where anyone can share experiences, stories, or poems in relation to this day. Also, at the end of our event at the Night Heron, we will provide a shuttle back to City Hall, so you don't have to worry about, how am I going to get my car up there? So we will be able to drive you back down to City Hall. Okay, I think we're ready to go ahead and begin. So first I'd like to introduce Dr. Jane Caputi. She is a professor of women's studies at FAU and a longtime advocate to end violence against women. Thanks, Jane.
Hi, everybody.
Maybe press the button.
Hi, everyone. I'm in mourning and enraged, but also extremely happy that we are all here protesting violence against sex workers. Have you all heard of Jack the Ripper? Anybody not heard of Jack the Ripper? No, I mean, he's this vast cultural figure. I remember reading once in the San Francisco Chronicle, a columnist writing, Jack the Ripper, that great hero of my youth who did all this work on alcoholic whores. And this was just seen as absolutely an okay thing to say. There was a restaurant in New York City called Jack the Ripper, right? What Jack the Ripper did, there's tours in London now where you can go and celebrate. They have Jack the Ripper cocktails, etc., and you can walk the walk. Where in 1888, this still unknown man murdered 5 street prostitutes and mutilated their bodies on 4 occasions, leaving them out in the street. Jack the Ripper has become a cultural myth, a cultural figure, and in many ways a cultural hero. We all know about him through our popular culture, whereas the women that he killed have been rendered virtually anonymous and unmourned. This is a pattern that has continued. Even up to, in England, about 20 years ago, there was a murderer of probably about 13 women who began with prostitutes and who like the original Ripper, seemed to be communicating with the press. But in any event, he killed about 5 prostitutes first, and no one was that alarmed. The police did not really start paying any attention to this walking home from work. I'm reminded of what Penny was saying. And here's what the police had to say. They took to the public media and made direct addresses to the killer. You have killed prostitutes. We all sympathize. Many do not like prostitutes. I'm really almost quoting exactly. But now you've turned your attention to an innocent girl. This shows that you have a disturbed state of mind. Really. In other words, a man just normatively hating prostitutes and feeling completely okay about going out and torturing and killing them is supposed to be okay. As I prepared for this event, I just started paying attention to the local newspapers. Right now in Pensacola, do we know that 4 women's bodies who were working as sex workers were found dumped in a little wooded area? Do you know that even? I opened up the New York Times yesterday. In a beach in Long Island, not far from where I grew up, 2 women's bodies were found. In Los Angeles right now, they finally found this guy who murdered many sex workers back in the 80s and then seemed to go underground for a while, or not active. But now they found him through DNA. I won't go into the whole story here. But they've now searching his apartment and find 180 photos of women. These are all black women. He was a black man too. And some of them seem to be dead. And the police are wondering who are these women and figuring that there may be 180 women completely unaccounted for in the registers who probably were murdered by this man. These women, we hear about the disappeared, right? In military dictatorships in Central and South America, for example. These women, and also young men and transgendered people who are working as sex workers, are our disappeared, right? There is an atrocity going on right now at the historical level, I think, of the European witch craze and other atrocities. And it is just all around us. It's just back, it's in our popular culture. Remember Pretty Woman? Who hasn't seen Pretty Woman? The opening scene shows a sex worker dumped in a garbage can, right? And they make that into a joke. And we learn that Julia Roberts is allowed to live because she's a good girl. She flosses her teeth. And ultimately, she'll come under the protection of a man and maybe even marry him. So then, when the Green River Killer was operating, a psychiatrist was interviewed by the police. And he was asked to describe the particular mindset of a serial killer. And he said, some men see women either as angels and whores with no middle, or whores with no middle ground. Excuse me, isn't that the view of the whole culture? Isn't that the review of the patriarchal religions that many of us grew up in? Isn't that the view of the police and the courts, right? Who often believe that any kind, that prostitutes cannot, for example, be sexually harassed or raped because they're in that category of bad girl as opposed to good girl. So let's take a moment tonight and be in both mourning and in rage and committed, if we have but one life to live, to ending this kind of violence. Thank you.